How would you feel if upon entering church today, the ushers and the greeters were standing at the doors with a checklist, saying, before you can come in, we have to see if there's certain things present within you. And they would walk up to Carol and say, now, Carol, do you have any hatred in your heart? Check. Or, Monica, have you stolen anything lately? What's defiled in you? Hopefully none of you murdered anybody. And they had this checklist, and unless you followed these 12 precepts, you can't come in church. You can't come into the presence of God. And in a 21st century church, I would say if this was the practice, the pews would be empty. Yep, yes. But in the ancient temple, to give you some perspective, a historical perspective, in the ancient temple, this was sort of the practice. And we even heard it today in the Psalm, Psalm 15. That before someone could enter the temple priest sort of had some questioning. Listen to this description of the ancient temple. This is a couple paragraphs. This was a ceremonial admitting of the Israelite people to the temple court. The temple was not like the church of today, which you could enter any time you chose, or you would please to. It was God's house that could be entered only at certain times and under proper conditions. One of the temple priests would be admitting people. The visitor had to answer the question of the priest at the gate, who may sojourn in this tent? In other words, your little stopover in this dwelling place of God. Who is it? And you should respond accordingly with this list of 12 stipulations. Those 12 stipulations, like what Jesus called off in the gospel of envy and hatred and all that, those 12 stipulations, they would show your commitment to the covenant or your willingness to convert, to have a conversion of heart. And only then could you enter into the presence of God. They knew that it was beyond the external rituals, but this was a matter of the heart. Now, of course, we don't have the TSA here in our doors checking on what you're bringing into the church. Thanks be to God. Because I would be one of the first ones they wouldn't let in. Sometimes people say to me, what's the hardest thing you do as an ordained minister of the church, a deacon of the church? I said, I put on these vestments because people look at you differently. I carry a lot of things in my heart, too, that I deal with all the time. And it's the things that we carry in our hearts that we bring to this place where the presence of God is real to us so that God can transform us. We come into the presence of God every time we gather in this place so that the things in our hearts, whether it's the things that we need to have transformed, some of the things that aren't so good, or maybe the prayers in our hearts that need to be transformed into a reality. That we have that faith that the presence of God within this place can indeed transform the things in our hearts. So we don't have the TSA at the doors. God welcomes us in this gathering of people where we know the presence of God. And how do we know the presence of God in this place we call St. Andrew, or within the whole Catholic community? How do we understand the presence of God? What's in the sacramental life? The sacraments is the veiled presence of the living God. The sacraments. In the Second Vatican Council, they said in their first document, the first document that was released from that Vatican Council, the document on the sacred liturgy, said the presence of God can be revealed 4 ways every time we gather for liturgy. The 4 ways. As we gather in this place with all the heaviness in our hearts, as we gather in this place, the first way we know the presence of God is by your gathering. The baptized people, very sacramentally, you are baptized in Christ, yes? Yes. You can say yes, go ahead. And because of your baptism, Christ is imbued in you, yes? Yes. The presence of God. And because of that, when the baptized community comes together, we know God is present. Yes. Yes. We know sacramentally that the presence of God is present in priesthood. Father Jim is the presider of the prayer, but he is the principal celebrant in the person of Christ. It is also sacramental, a celebration of a sacrament that gives this man a special responsibility to stand in the presence of Christ. So we know the presence of God in two ways. We know the presence of God when the Word is proclaimed. We especially stand during the gospel in readiness because we know it's Jesus in that Word. We are ready to become doers of the Word, as St. James said in the Epistle. But our fullest expression of the presence of God, our fullest expression of the presence of God that can transform everything within us, it's the culmination of every sacramental moment in the church. It's the one place where St. John Paul said in his encyclical that the church draws her life from this sacrament. And the Second Vatican Council said it is the source and the summit from which all blessings flow is the Eucharist. It is the Eucharist, the true presence of God. In every aspect, it's our fullest expression of saying God is present. So when we cross over the thresholds of the church, bring with us all the heaviness of our heart and the things that we most need to change within us, we can be guaranteed that if it is our intention to seek this change within us, let's go back to the acronym TSA. We in hope will know that we will be transformed sacramentally always. And from God's perspective, reverse those three letters, God always sacramentally wants to transform us. So no matter what we carry into this place, the sacraments of the church are there for us to transform us. What a beautiful thing we have in our Catholic tradition. Even when we're in our deepest sin, the sacrament of reconciliation is there to transform us. So we should never be afraid, or we should never be restricted from being in the presence of God. And it's such a powerful reality that even outside of our liturgical assembly, we have a devotion that we gather as people of faith just to pray before the presence of God. We call it adoration. Just to be still with the Blessed Sacrament. And here at St. Andrew's, the first Wednesday of every month, we have this for us. That the Blessed Sacrament is exposed in the monstrance so that we can come together as a people to pray. This month, we're going to extend that from 10 in the morning until 7 p.m. because there's a really big reason why we're doing this. And I hope you consider coming this Wednesday sometime to pray before the Blessed Sacrament. And the reason is this. We've had a relationship for the last 16 years, 14 years, something like that, with the people of Palestine, our Christian brothers and sisters in the Holy Land, where many of us have traveled to the Holy Land and become friends with these people. These are the Christians who are in the crosshairs of Jewish occupation and radical Muslim extremists. And right now, just outside of Bethlehem, that wall that they're building is ripping up property, and they're taking people's property away to put up this wall. I'm not here to make a political statement. It's a reality. And it's a reality based in hate. And we are praying for those people who have visited us. We're praying for them, that this heaviness on their heart, that God, when we come together in the presence of God, can transform this reality. That God can transform something that we bring to this place for our friends in the Holy Land. That prayer service from 10 in the morning till 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, it's going to culminate with a rosary at 6. And we're going to have it live streamed with our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. And we will be praying. So we'd hope to fill this church. But it would also be nice if you would call the office to sign up and take one of those hours just to be present in the presence of God. So the things we carry in our heart, anything, whether the things that we're contrite about, or the supplications for praying for another. We believe in the presence of God every time we gather as a people. And we know that God, TSA, can transform sacramentally always. And from God's perspective, the things we offer, always sacramentally, God will transform.